This is a bad road for us to go down.
Former President Bill Clinton calls out government officials speaking at the Civil Rights Summit in Austin tonight. Following on the heels of President Jimmy Carter at the LBJ Civil Rights Summit, celebrating the 50th anniversary of that landmark legislation. Tonight in Austin, former President Bill Clinton said the fight for civil rights is far from over and pointed to the Texas voter ID law as a prime example of the fight. Kevin Schwaller has the story from the LBJ Presidential Library.
Former President Clinton put a heavy focus today on the Texas voter ID law that requires voters to present some form of photo identification that's approved, such as a state ID or a driver's license. He criticized the law today, but he also looked back. After a song from Mavis Staples, who also used her voice as a civil rights activist. After readings from the country's civil rights history.
Martin Luther King Jr. Letter from a Birmingham jail.
Former President Bill Clinton praised the civil rights leaders of the past.
These laws were bargained for shrewdly by a political genius. They were championed with great purpose by distinguished citizens.
Then the former president turned to criticize the Supreme Court decision, getting rid of the requirement for some states to get voting changes approved by Washington. He also took a stance against the Texas voter ID law.
It's dead serious. We all know what this is about. This is a way of restricting the franchise after 50 years of expanding it.
The crowd at the speech seemed supportive of Clinton's message.
Made me start thinking, well, what can I do to get out there and help people get identification and stuff like that.
Particularly voting and what's happening today is, is really paramount to maintaining people's rights.
Republicans in the state maintain the ID law in Texas is a way to combat voter fraud.
I am concerned that on this 50th anniversary, these divisions and the lack of a spirit of coming together put us back in the dustbin of old history.
In closing, Clinton looked back to President Johnson for an example of how he believes the country should move forward. That address concluded the second day out here at the Civil Rights Summit. Now the crowds are preparing for tomorrow when two people with experience in the Oval Office will speak. Reporting in Austin, Kevin Schwaller, KXAN News.
One of the interesting items unveiled today, Google officials at the summit rolled out an interactive timeline feature. You see it here. It was put together with National Archives documents showcasing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the events leading up to the passage of that landmark law. We have a link to it with our other in-depth coverage on KXAN.com. Former Lieutenant Governor and a friend of Lyndon Johnson's, Ben Barnes, spoke today about the importance of this summit and LBJ's place in the history of U.S. domestic policy.
He really passed the legislation that's the framework and foundation of our government today, and you can't erase that.
Barnes also talked about how worried he feels Johnson would be today with the divide in this country and how the erosion of civil rights is playing into that. Tomorrow, of course, President Obama will give the keynote address at this summit, and former President George W. Bush will give the final speech later in the evening. We will live stream those speeches for you on our website at KXAN.com and show you President Obama's speech on KXAN tomorrow morning at 11:30.